What if everything you've ever been told about capitalism is a lie? What if the free market isn't free at all, but a carefully engineered illusion, controlled by just 12 men whose names you'll never see on Forbes or CNBC? They don't run companies, they run money itself. The inflation you feel at the grocery store, the rent hikes that are crushing your budget, the slow, painful collapse of the middle class. All of it traces back to decisions made in silent boardrooms you'll never be invited into. Because hidden beneath Wall Street, beyond the Federal Reserve, and completely outside any government's reach, there's a shadow system. A system worth over $1.2 quadrillion. That number is so vast it can move entire currencies, trigger recessions, and decide which nations rise and which nations fall. This isn't a theory. This is the unfiltered truth that the global media will never show you. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button, because here, we follow the money where it actually leads. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I want to see just how far this truth can reach. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand how 12 men built an invisible empire, and why we've all been paying the price ever since. Now, let's rewind. The illusion begins in 1913, the year the Federal Reserve was created. Officially, it was meant to stabilize the American economy. Unofficially, it gave private bankers legal control over the creation of US money. Does that sound familiar? When the markets crashed in 1929, who profited? The very same financial houses that shorted America's future. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, the Rothschild interests. They were all there, consolidating assets at pennies on the dollar, while the world burned. By 1944, during the Bretton Woods Agreement, these same families helped design the New World Monetary Order. They pegged every major currency to the US dollar, and by extension, to their private debt machine. Sound familiar again? Because what followed the 1971 Nixon shock, when gold was abandoned, turned every single currency into pure debt. From that moment on, every dollar, yen, and euro was no longer backed by gold, but by trust. The kind of trust that is easily manipulated by those who print the money. Fast forward to the 1980s. Wall Street deregulation, derivatives, and financial engineering exploded. Suddenly, debt could be packaged, sliced, sold, and resold 100 times over. Are you starting to see the pattern? The same men who once controlled gold and oil now controlled the future itself. Through complex instruments like credit default swaps, synthetic CDOs, and currency derivatives. They built a parallel economy, one that operates completely in the shadows. By 2008, when the global financial crisis hit, $700 billion in public bailout money went to protect who? The same institutions that caused the crisis in the first place. And what did they do next? They doubled down. By 2023, the total notional value of global derivatives hit an unimaginable $1.2 quadrillion. That's more than 10 times the entire global GDP. That's not finance. That's feudalism, only it's digital and debt-based. The same 12 men, sitting on interlocked boards of major funds, clearinghouses, and central banks, became the de facto rulers of the global economy and their empire. It's invisible by design. So here's the twist you've been waiting for. The real power doesn't sit in Washington or London. It sits in Basel, Switzerland. That's where the Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, operates. It's often called the Central Bank of Central Banks. Created in 1930, it is completely immune from national law, taxation, or public oversight. It's where central bankers meet behind closed doors to coordinate interest rates, money flows, and liquidity injections decisions that ripple through every stock and paycheck on Earth. Now connect the dots. These 12 men, the CEOs of the largest shadow banking entities and hedge funds, use derivative exposure to control central bank behavior. Through swaps and leveraged positions, they can effectively force monetary decisions that serve their portfolios first, and entire nations second. You think inflation just happened? You think the debt crisis of the 2020s was an accident? No, it was engineered. And the person who designed the modern derivative system wasn't even a politician. You will not believe the name. Because when you see who connected the world's debt markets to the central banks, you'll realize this conspiracy was never about stealing money. It was about stealing time. Remember the name I hinted at? Blythe Masters. Back in the 90s, at just 25 years old. Working deep inside JP Morgan, she invented the credit default swap. It was the derivative that would go on to change the world. On paper, the idea was brilliant. A way to insure debt. Think of it like a safety net for loans. But in reality, it created a weaponized illusion of safety. This illusion allowed banks to lend almost infinitely, without any real fear of loss. It was like driving a race car without brakes, convinced you had an unbreakable shield. Within a single decade, the total value of these credit derivatives exploded. It went from a respectable $180 billion to an astronomical $60 trillion. By 2007, this financial machine was an unstoppable juggernaut. So, when the subprime mortgage market finally collapsed in 2008, the entire system should have gone down with it. It was the moment of truth. But it didn't. Why? Because the very same 12 institutions that had engineered the crash were the only ones big enough to demand a rescue. They weren't just too big to fail. The truth is, they were too connected to fail. So, how does this invisible architecture of power actually work? Well, it all starts with a concept called shadow banking. Through this, these financial elites operate completely outside of regulation, in what economists call the Eurodollar system. This doesn't mean the currency of Europe. It refers to US dollars that are created and held offshore, completely invisible to the Federal Reserve, and beyond the reach of US law, right now. There are over $13 trillion in these offshore dollar liabilities. That's money that technically exists nowhere on a traditional balance sheet, yet it influences absolutely everything in our global economy. And here's the kicker. When central banks inject liquidity during a crisis, the bailouts we hear about, where do you think that money goes first? It's not going to small businesses on Main Street. It's not going to workers who lost their jobs. It flows directly into liquidity conduits, the hedge funds, the clearinghouses, and the global custodians, all of which are controlled by those same financial dynasties. They are positioned to profit from every single collapse. You see, every bubble is engineered to expand credit, and every crash is then used to consolidate ownership of real, tangible assets. Land, gold, data, even water rights. This is the mechanism by which just 12 individuals now indirectly control 90% of the global equity markets and over $100 trillion in managed capital. Let's just break that number down to see how staggering it is. BlackRock manages $10 trillion, Vanguard $8 trillion, State Street $5 trillion. JP Morgan Asset Management has $3 trillion. Then you have UBS, Goldman Sachs, Fidelity, and Citadel, which together manage another $15 trillion. But it's not just about the assets they hold, it's about the votes those assets represent. In 2024, a single fund manager at a firm like BlackRock could have voting power over 17,000 different companies. That's more influence than any single government in human history has ever had. And that's just the visible layer. Behind all of this lies the derivative web, a complex network of contracts worth over $1.2 quadrillion. That's $1,200 trillion. Let that number sink in for a moment. This web links every bond, every stock, and every currency to the same network of shadow transactions. If just 3% of those interconnected bets go wrong, the entire global economy implodes. And who gets to decide which 3% are allowed to fail? Those same 12 men, sitting in digital rooms, with algorithms running 24 hours a day, trading the world's future like it's a casino chip. Now, here's the sick genius of it all. These financial instruments are so incredibly complex that no single regulator on Earth fully understands them. The 2008 crash was called a black swan event, a rare, unpredictable catastrophe, but it wasn't. It was the intended result of a system deliberately designed to privatize profits and socialize losses. Remember when Lehman Brothers collapsed? $600 billion evaporated, seemingly overnight. Yet, just months later, the Federal Reserve quietly created $16 trillion in emergency credit lines to bail out both foreign and domestic banks. $16 trillion. All of it was done without a single congressional vote. The result? The markets recovered, the elites got richer than ever, and the middle class fell behind by an entire generation. Now, let's fast forward to the 2020 pandemic. Global debt exploded past $300 trillion, and the money supply in the US alone grew by 41% in just 2 years. We were told inflation was caused by supply chain issues. The reality is that it was caused by liquidity injections, $9 trillion from the Fed, with half of it flowing directly into hedge fund repo markets. They called it quantitative easing. A more accurate term might be financial hypnosis. Because the same cycle plays out every single time: inflate massive asset bubbles with debt, crash them on schedule. Then, use public money, our money, to buy up what's left for pennies on the dollar. It's the oldest trick in the empire's playbook. The Romans did it with grain. The British did it with colonies. The elites of today do it with derivatives and digital currencies. And here, as the quiet part they do, want you to hear. The next phase is already being built. Enter CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. They'll sell this to us as innovation, as a step towards financial inclusion. But in reality, it's the final evolution of control. When money becomes digital and programmable, they don't just control inflation anymore. They control permission, your savings, your transactions, even your ability to buy food or travel could be turned on or off. All of it will be under the same network, managed by the BIS, the IMF, and the same financial institutions that already run the shadow system. They'll tell you it's for your safety. But history tells us that every empire's final act is a desperate grab for total control. We are living in a financial simulation built by a handful of men who never stood for election, never faced a public vote, and have never had to answer for the chaos they've unleashed upon the world. Every market crash since 1929 has been a chapter in the same playbook. Every recovery has simply been the reloading of the next illusion. And right now, as global debt surpasses $350 trillion and interest costs devour entire national budgets, the endgame is becoming clear. Collapse is no longer an accident, it's policy. Because from the ashes of every crisis, the same few consolidate more power, more data, and more ownership. They have successfully turned our time, our labor, and our trust into a commodity they trade like a stock ticker. But here, that's the one truth. They can T-berry forever. The illusion only works as long as we believe in it. The moment people start asking the right questions, the empire starts to crack. So, share this video. Let the algorithm work for truth, not for control. Because if 12 men can control the world's wealth, just imagine what millions of informed people can do with the world's truth. We are not powerless. We are simply distracted. And the next time you hear someone say the market decided, remember this: it wasn't the market. It was the men behind the curtain, pulling the levers of $1 trillion illusion. So I'll leave you with one final question. Are we wiser now? Or are we just walking the same path in better suits? Thanks for watching. If this opened your eyes, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. It helps get this information out to more people. See you next time.